All right, so what do we have here? Doge dividend. James Fishback, who's been pushing for the Doge dividend of $5,000 to individuals, has given us some updates on his POV with an interview he just did with Newsweek on the Doge dividend. He suggests that in talks with Donald Trump and Elon Musk, both are still open to issuing a Doge dividend. And this time he says that the Doge dividend would actually be different than normal stimulus checks, and that normal stimulus checks were also open to illegal immigrants, mostly because anybody with a taxpayer identification number, in some cases, were eligible for certain COVID stimulus checks, whereas others weren't. However, the Doge dividend will explicitly exclude any undocumented or illegal immigrants and verify immigration status. James Fishback suggests that legislation is expected to include the Doge dividend, to be determined when. It's unclear as to whether or not the Doge dividend could be included in a budget reconciliation process. It's possible. We saw that during COVID. We expect that Donald Trump's tax plan later this year will be passed through budget reconciliation, which does not require any Democrat votes. And so it can be done. And that's why the law, it takes time to draft the laws and to be reviewed and debated and all the nonsense. But it'll likely get passed through party lines. Unclear if the Doge dividend will be able to fit in there. But what you really need, in my opinion, economically, is you need stimulus in this bill that comes. Whether that's a Doge dividend or more tax cuts, I don't know, but you need something. Because you really got to get growth in the economy again. So can that come from fiscal spending? Yeah. Could that expand the budget debt and potentially undo the goals that Donald Trump is looking for? Sure. But is the goal to avoid a recession or to go through a nasty detox actual recession where, we triple down on tariffs to tax other countries and increase the burden on the global economy, United States being a massive part of that? So it's going to be really interesting. But I expect towards the end of this year, we're going to get this budget reconciliation tax cut. Whether that includes no taxes on those making under $150,000 to be determined, but it is likely to extend the 2017 tax cuts. It is likely to bring back many capital expenditure immediate depreciation write-offs. Like, for example, in 2022, you could buy a plane and write off 100% of it. Today, I think you can only write off about 50% of it or less. It sort of phases it out over time. The Trump tax cuts might sort of renew that. But it's not just that. It would also be for machinery for businesses or other types of investments that you make. But beyond just sort of continuing those tax cuts to prevent basically a tax hike, we obviously expect no taxes on Social Security, tips, overtime, maybe a SALT tax expansion, and potentially some new tax cuts that could incentivize basically people to spend on the economy. These new tax cuts should be stimulative. The question is, when are they going to hit? See, excuse me, even if we get this Doge dividend that James Fishback is pushing, excuse me, which they're looking for a full $5,000 Doge dividend, which is basically, a proportion of the $2 trillion of savings Doge is trying to achieve, keeping in mind that so far, Doge claims they've saved about $115 billion. Journalists argue that about 40% of their claimed savings are fugazi, maybe even more, because only a fraction of that $115 billion on the Doge websites actually has receipts. They say they're working on providing more receipts, but even the receipts that they do provide are being questioned. So it's unclear. Everything's sort of a work in progress. At least somebody's working on cutting waste, right? Again, how much waste gets cut? TBD. But I think whether or not Doge cuts a full $2 trillion doesn't even matter so much. I think there's actually a likelihood that you could get a Doge dividend check, except they'll just rebrand it like a Doge stimulus check. Because I think we're more likely to go into a recession than not. And that's going to have a lot of people suffering. And I think there'll actually be a bipartisan push for some form of stimulus in 2026, right before the midterm elections. Trump will put his signature on it, and you'll be right back to stimmy checks. You know what Kevin's talking about? Kevin's talking about the trade alerts and the awesome Meet Kevin membership over at meetkevin.com, where you can get access to all 8 courses, every trade alert, every private live stream, every alpha report, course member meetups later this year, you name it. everything. Trump, real estate, the Trumponomics course, the real estate course, the how to get stuff done and be productive, the sales course, the real estate investing course, the stocks and site course, all for a low fee that you could pay on a monthly basis, quarterly, or annually if you want. Pretty inexpensive, as low as $1.63 a day. This price won't last. The price will go up on this, so buckle up for that. And when that price goes up, if you've already signed up for one of these subscriptions, you will preserve your price. So your price won't go up. Only new signups will have a more expensive price. So consider that when you're looking at the Meet Kevin membership. We will have this price go up soon. So hop in before it does, and then you'll be able to lock in your price. And I think you could potentially just create this cycle of inflation and deflation, inflation and deflation, which isn't great. But I think this time there's a chance it could actually culminate in an actual full-fledged recession where 10 million more Americans are unemployed than previously. I hope that doesn't happen. But I mean, look at this. Bloomberg Intelligence, we talked about this earlier, but just to remind you, Bloomberg Intelligence has this argument that the federal government cutting as much as they are from software seats could lead to about 40% of all software contracts being cut. Now, this would be your app market. So think about this. 40% of the application software market is exposed to Doge cost cutting. That's Microsoft, Oracle, ADP, Autodesk, ServiceNow, cybersecurity, doesn't matter. All of them could be hit. Excuse me. Technically, the government is only makes up about 5% of our software spend, but all of the other businesses or contractors that rely on the government spending that get cut could make up the other 35% of software multiples that basically get cut, software contracts that get cut. So now instead of, hey, we have, 1 million users for our software and we're growing 20% a year, so next year we have 1.2 million, you might actually be at, oh crap, now we only have 800,000 users, which isn't great for software multiples because you basically put them into a growth recession or likely the whole economy into a real recession. So Bloomberg Intelligence is making this estimate. It's not coming from me. But those downstream effects are just one of the side effects of cuts to spending, in addition to obviously longer wait times on the phone if you're trying to call Social Security. But that needs some modernization anyway. We'll talk about that in just a moment. But, I think it is more likely that Doge stimulus checks come than Doge dividend checks. I'm not convinced yet that Doge is going to be able to cut as much as they're claiming. But that's okay because, again, at least somebody's working on it. However, it is also going to lead to some disruptions. See, Intuit, I was reading the Intuit earnings call this morning, and Intuit says that, hey, it's really good that somebody's focusing on the elimination of tax fraud, waste, and overhead costs at the IRS. Totally agree. I don't think any American disagrees with that. And Intuit says they're helping the administration in this, and they don't see any risk to the IRS providing services. Well, good for them, but the Washington Post has a piece where they say the Social Security Administration website has crashed 4 times in 10 days this month because the servers were overloaded, blocking millions of retirees and disabled Americans from logging into their online accounts. In the field, office managers have resorted to answering phones in place of receptionists because so many employees have been pushed out. Amid all this, the agency no longer has a system to monitor customer experience because that office was eliminated as part of the cost-cutting efforts led by Elon Musk. All right. So now you're actually coring out things that people rely on. Now, it's probably, at least in part, because the goal is to try to make things more efficient. That's the whole point of Doge anyway. Right now, it takes an average of 233 days to review a Social Security claim, which is kind of crazy that it takes that long. But you have a lot of people who work inside of these administrations who were promoted to look for cut costs, cut contracts, offer early retirement, buy people out, consolidate programs, consolidate offices. And that's going to have downstream effects for the economy. But it's also going to piss people off who have to wait on hold even longer. Although probably some of this probably just needs to move all online anyway. For example, if you're going to be in a place where you're relying on phone calls, the Washington Post is like, oh my gosh, people are waiting on hold. shouldn't we be in a place where we're able to do whatever we need to do with Social Security over the over the internet rather than over the phone? I mean, I personally think so. It seems pretty straightforward. I don't know. Maybe it's not. But, if you need to talk to a person, certainly email is a tool that is substantially more efficient than phone call. That's my opinion. I think phone calls, unless you're trying to build rapport with a client, I think for transactional things like IRS work or Social Security work, I mean, forgive me, but I don't think you actually need to be on the phone with people. So I do think that there are a lot of opportunities to find efficiency here. But they are going to have some pretty frustrating impacts in the short term for people who rely on these services. And then in the longer term, yeah, I mean, Bloomberg Intelligence could be correct that you could end up crashing even some portions of the software market that's been relying on these growth rates that are in part led by the government wasting money on even sometimes unused subscriptions. And so as a result of, the Atlanta Fed real GDP now gold adjusted estimate sitting at just 0.2%, which is likely going to revise us into a recession if this continues, I personally think a Doge stimulus is more likely than a Doge dividend. But it is interesting to see that you've got James Fishback pushing with Trump and Musk to get the Doge dividend included in legislation, and that illegal immigrants will not be eligible for it. So it's something interesting to keep in mind. So somebody here, Russ Moment says, that doesn't sound good for my Salesforce stock. Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, look, I don't have anything bad to say. I have my own personal experiences with Salesforce, but we'll keep that aside. I'm not trying to single out any particular kind of, CRM or software company or whatever. When you have to keep this in mind, if the economy goes into recession, everybody's going to look for places to cut. Everybody's going to look and go, do we really need that many Adobe Premiere subscriptions? Do we really need that many AutoCAD subscriptions? Do we really need to host all of these Matterport, scans from 10 years ago? Probably not, right? Like all of those little cuts are things that just add up. And then remember, a recession, all a recession technically is negative growth. You just had a cycle of some cost cutting that happened. Like this idea that we should always grow at 2 or 3% and never have a negative year is not realistic in history, right? So I find that very interesting. Okay, cool. So Doug Hoppy says, people are doing business every day borrowing money from the bank at 6% plus. Yeah, even like 7, 8, 9%. Construction projects are like 11, 12%. Giving back 5% is cheaper for house hack and better for you. Bingo. See, now that is a logical comment. Here is a human being that actually has a brain. Wow, house hack if you think about it that way, house hack's basically financing the acquisition of wedge deals at 5%. That's a great deal in this environment. That's a fantastic deal. But it's a win for all sides. So, that's a great way to put it. I like it. So anyway, this is interesting. So Scott here says, you have to also remember the older folks who have difficulty using the online services. This is true. And unfortunately, what happens when you shrink the government is you basically privatize the aid that older individuals need. So if you're in a care facility, the care facilities are going to have to set up a tech support to help all the seniors send their emails about their Social Security. Okay, but that cost is going to be paid by someone. The care facility has to pay for it, and then guess what? They're going to bill the customers for it. So it's not free, right? These cuts are not free. Somebody has to pay to help older folks who can't use the internet use the internet. Again, it's not free. Somebody's got to pay for it. So, yeah. The equity itself can generate... house hack properties are wedge deals. Their equity in itself can generate much higher yields than 5%. Exactly. Like, you get $1 million worth of wedges, you get a $200,000 wedge. That pays for a lot of 5%. Especially if you cycle that. So I appreciate that.
Why not advertise these things that you told us here? I feel like nobody else knows about this.
We'll try a little advertising and see how it goes.
Congratulations, man. You have done so much. People love you. People look up to you.
Kevin Paffrath there, financial analyst and YouTuber. Meet Kevin. Always great to get your take.